thank you for coming. I always feel very touched when people come to my talks because I just still get surprised that people are interested in my story and things that some of the wisdom perhaps that I might be able to share. And I've been all around Australia now over the last 12 months speaking to lots of wide-ranging groups. But it's really special for me when I get to speak to people that have been through the same sort of experience. Just last week I was up in Brisbane for the National Stroke Foundation training to be an advocate for the foundation. And it was the first time I'd actually sit in one room, and there was about 10 of us, of stroke survivors and their carers. And it was just a lovely feeling to be with people that understood the journey just from here. So thank you again for coming. I can't remember speeches anymore since I had my brain injury, which was 6 years ago now. I can't remember a 20-minute talk. So I gave up on that ages ago. But what I do is I just signpost a few things and tell stories. So sometimes the skip from one story to another might be a little bit jerky, I don't know. But it seems to work, and it's the best way I can do in terms of giving talks. So we're really here to talk about, I'm here to talk about disability. And I want to say that disability isn't a life sentence. In fact, it can be an opening to a new way of being. And I would describe some of my experiences and a little bit of research that I've come across in relation to that. It was just a couple of months ago, my eldest daughter, who's 19, is now studying in Melbourne. And we live in the country, and it was her first time to be living in a city, be living away from home, being studying at university. And a couple of months ago, she gave me a call and said, "Dad, I'm really struggling with my studies. I've got this 1,500-word assignment to do, and I just can't understand what I'm meant to be doing." And the more I got to talk to her, the more I realized there was a bit more going on than just not being able to read and do this assignment. There are a whole lot of things, and I won't go into them, of course, here, but she was facing some real life challenges. And at that moment, once I understood some of the details of the challenges, I said, "Hold on, just wait there." I got on the phone, I spoke to the relevant people at the university. I also spoke to some health practitioners. I didn't know any of these people, so I'm just ringing Melbourne and finding my way around. And lined up a whole lot of appointments, consultations for her to have over about 4 days. So I managed to concentrate them in 4 days, and immediately I resolved to go down and be with her. Straight away I thought, I want to be with you, because I remembered what it was like to go to all these different consultations on my own, feeling like I don't know what the hell is going on, feeling very vulnerable, very fragile. And I'm a smart guy. I was used to being able to think things through, being able to understand stuff, and it was a time in my life when I couldn't understand stuff. My brain wasn't working like it had always used to work. So I just wanted to be with her, to be with these other people that she was being with, and just to feel reassured that she was okay. So I went down and took a week off my normal work activities, and we had the most wonderful time. So we went to all the consultations, and by me being there, I could help out with a few things. And by spending time with her, I could see other needs that she had that she didn't even think to ask me about, just everyday living things that a 19-year-old needs help with. And we hung out at the zoo in Melbourne, enjoyed the meerkats, you know, watching them rubbing their tummies and curling on the ground and running around, and did some just lovely things, went to restaurants, and I got a real sense of what her lifestyle is like now. I met some of her friends and some of her student friends and a couple of her teachers, and I just felt reassured. And she really enjoyed that time with me as well. And I want to ask you this question. I just made up this question. Why did the chicken cross the busy road? Because I made this up, so it's not very funny. because he wanted to get home. And the chicken was prepared to cross the busy road, little chicken crossing the busy road, because he wanted to get home. And we all want to get home. Think of all the things that we do to make home a place that we want to be. It's a place of shelter, it's a place of comfort, it's a place of familiarity, it's a place of food, it's a place of caring, it's so many things. And if we think of home as a metaphor for our life, like we create our life, we put all these things into our life, we create this home, this sense of familiarity, this comfort, this support. When we have a brain injury, it's like suddenly home shatters. And it's not like a physical home shattering. You know, when there's been a natural disaster and a house has been destroyed, you can go there and in one day a builder can look at the house and say, oh, well, that's damaged, but we can fix this up. Or no, we can't fix that up. It's fairly quick to assess what's working and what's not working. But when the brain goes, and it goes like that, one day it's working and one day it's not, we're dealing with a very different thing. I mean, the human brain has 86 billion neurons, and the potential for connection between all those neurons is astronomical. I think the population of the world's about 6 billion. And if all those 6 billion people went onto Facebook and became Facebook friends and started talking to one another, it would get nowhere near the complexity of communication that the human brain is capable of. So because of the complexity of our human brain, it means when something goes wrong, it takes quite a while to work out what's still working and what's been damaged. And it took me about 18 months, I reckon it's about 18 months to 2 years, after a brain injury, in my experience, to work out what still works and what doesn't work. And one of the reasons it takes so long is that after a brain injury, it's natural. We want to go back to that home that we had before. We want to go back to that life that we had before, doing the sorts of things that we did before. Why can't I do those things like I did before? That's what we want to do. It's the natural automatic reaction. But our brain won't let us do that. And so it takes at least 18 months to start to do the things that you used to do for the first time and realize, oops, oh, I can't do it like I used to, or I can't do it at all, or I have to find some new way of doing that. And in that 18 months to 2 years, I kept thinking, well, I'll go back to being this expert psychologist somehow. Maybe I need to retrain and just do some speciality. So I even thought I might go back and study neuroscience and become a neuroscientist. And I had a case manager at that time, and he investigated the course demands. And it became really clear very quickly there was no way, well, I won't say it became clear quickly, it took me a while, but he was clear about it, that I was not going to be able to do a high-level university postgraduate course, even though it was a subject I was intensely interested in. For a start, I couldn't think as quickly as I used to think. I couldn't think as analytically as I used to think. And I couldn't learn stuff like I used to learn it. I'd be reading a page in a professional book and could more or less understand what it said on that page. But then I'd read the next page and forget what the previous page said. I couldn't connect things together. And I thought I was imagining that until I got an assessment by a speech pathologist who said, yeah, you've got a real problem connecting concepts. And that used to be a strength that I had. But the other big reason why I realized I couldn't go back to that sort of study and become some new sort of psychologist or specialist was the fatigue. I was sleeping hours a day. And they said, well, not only would it be 9 to 5, this course, working in labs most of the time, you would be doing assignments on the weekends. Well, I couldn't even stay awake from 9 to 5. I'm talking 18 months, 2 years later. I'm having to rest during the day. So there were so many challenges that I had to realize that were present for me that weren't present before. And it was about that 18 months, 2 years stage that I accepted that I had a disability. And that word disability became a relief. It became like a salve for my wounds, because I thought, wow, I've got a disability. That's why you can't do that stuff that you used to do. With disability, or with the idea of being disabled, came acceptance. And acceptance is a relief. It's like, well, I've only got one leg now, so that means I can't just run up mountains. Oh, that's why. Okay, so I won't try running up mountains anymore. So with acceptance comes relief. And acceptance, I think, is a very beautiful state to get into, because we have to start where we're at right now. And with a brain injury, I think that takes a while to work that out. There's a lot of pushing and shoving and trying and experimenting. But when you get to that state of acceptance, when you can see what it is that you can still do and what you can't do, and the other people around you now understand where you're at as well, that's when in my experience, you can start to move forward. We have to understand where we are right now before we can progress. And what I noticed that with acceptance, the doors that had closed, I thought, well, they're closed now. Stop knocking on those doors of the old home that I kept trying to go back to. I now need to create a new home. And what was remarkable in my experience is that new home started to open up into new possibilities. One of the things that I hadn't really recognized in myself is that I'd always been a creative person. I played a lot of music, and at one point in my teenage years, I even wondered whether I might become a professional musician, but in the end, I decided to pursue psychology. And when I was recovering, one of the ways I used to help my brain get active again, because I understood that activated the left prefrontal cortex, which is the storytelling part of our brain, the brain that tries to make sense of our experience, was to do writing, autobiographical writing. So writing just about my experiences and trying to connect the experiences and work out, well, if this happened, why did it happen? And in that process of writing, and I was encouraged by a couple of my health professionals to do this, I started to realize that maybe if I could write my story and my story of recovery, assuming I could recover, because I was still on that process of recovery, then maybe that would be helpful for other people. And in the process of trying to write, I realized it's actually not that easy. It's not that easy to write story in a way that people want to read. And so I did a lot of online writing courses, attended writers groups, and I discovered that I couldn't write about conceptual stuff, that professional stuff like I used to be able to, but I could write about me. I could write about my personal experiences. And of course I brought my background in psychology, and I'd worked with brain injured people before. So I already had some understanding of how the brain worked. So I could write my story. And that was a new way for me, because instead of professional writing where you don't talk about your feelings or yourself even, I could write about me, and my heart just opened. I could write about feelings and write about why things meant stuff to me and why they didn't. And I noticed that that flowed over into my relationships with people. I noticed that I could feel people in a way I hadn't felt before. I could feel what people were good for me and what people weren't good for me. I could feel more of a heart connection with people. It was more like an energetic, it felt like we're trading energies. Whereas my old head self wouldn't recognize those energies so much. So wonderful things started to happen for me in terms of new opportunities, and that writing the book has led to all sorts of other opportunities as well. And now I wondered whether I was just unusual in that I was starting to become this new person with new wonderful things happening for me. And I went to a presentation recently by a researcher, and she talked about post-traumatic growth, where people have had a life shock. And she was mostly talking about life crises brought about by health problems like diagnosis of cancer or brain injury, those sorts of things. Big health stuff, health scares. And she said that researchers have found that there's a lot of growth that people experience after a shock like that, and even though there's ongoing disability. And some of the things that she said have been found to often occur for people in those states were all the things that I'd noticed had occurred for me. And number one was compassion. Number one was compassion. Just developing a much more compassionate nature. And I'd noticed that I was just much more aware of people's distress and suffering, and I would want to respond to that. I'd want to help that if I could. And she said the number one finding is that people become more compassionate. And if they've had some particular health condition, often they want to help out others that have had this health condition. But it can widen as well. And part of the reason why I've been involved in helping to set up Compassionate Mind Australia, which is sort of research type applications of compassion to producing a more caring and helping society, is just that desire to spread this idea of compassion as a healing force and something that's good for all of us in our society. So compassion and that compassionate nature can go, way beyond yourself. The other thing that she said often occurs, and this was pretty high in the findings, was a greater appreciation of the relationships that we have. And I'd noticed that my relationships, certainly my family relations, friends' relationships, had become much higher in priority for me. I just valued relationships with people a lot more and wanted to give it more time, invest more energy into it. The other thing I noticed, and she verified this, was appreciation of life, just greater appreciation for what you have. And I'd noticed that all the complicated ways that we have for trying to enjoy life became less important for me. A walk along the beach, just spending time having a cup of tea with a good friend. These were the sorts of things that I appreciated most. These were simple things. They didn't have to be complicated things. The material types of pleasures seemed far less important. The money type pleasures seemed far less important. And so an appreciation of life, what I have, a sense of gratitude, just seemed to increase. And she said this occurs often for people as well. The other finding, she said, is personal strength. When people go through a life crisis and come out the other side, is this sense, wow, I'm much stronger than I thought I was. And I now know that I can have other life crises should they come, and I feel strong now. I feel like I could get through those. And so you develop this inner confidence that you can handle what might come along. And finally, there was often spiritual growth. People asking, what's the meaning of life for me? What really is important? Is this the sort of work that I really want to do? Is this meaningful for me? What are the relationships that I have? Are they meaningful for me? What is greater good? What do I want my life to be like now and leave behind me? These sorts of questions. And she said that the people that seemed to strive most after these life crises were those who had the biggest shock. So in general, and it doesn't apply to everyone, the bigger the shock, the more people question what was important to them. She said that younger people in particular tend to show more post-traumatic growth because they don't, you know what it's like when you're young, you just think you're invincible, nothing bad could happen. But when you're young and you get one of these life shocks, it's really, really unexpected. As you get older, you expect to have some sort of illness of one sort or another. And the other factor, she said, is women more than men tend to do better after a life crisis, but she couldn't explain that. She said that, I asked her about personality traits. She said people that are a bit more open to ask for help, not sort of so self-reliant, people that are interested in new possibilities, that sort of attitude, they tend to do better as well. So it was really nice to hear this sort of research affirmation of all the things that I'd experienced myself. And if I think back to that story I told you about my daughter, it was that immediate response that I wanted to be with her, just to reduce her suffering, and that I would make time to be with her. Because previously in my more work-focused self, I would have found it hard to justify giving up a week to go down and be with her. But no problems this time. She was more important than anything else. And you know, the little things that we didn't have to do anything really complicated. Even just riding the tram from one appointment to another seemed like fun, like something nice to be doing with her. And I realised that this experience, this challenge she was going through, was developing her personal strengths, and that me as a parent was really just being like a coach, and that she needed to discover things for herself. As a parent or as a coach, it's hard to watch your progeny or those that you're coaching having to learn life experiences themselves, but you have to. You can just provide the best advice you can. So finally, I want to say that disability is not necessarily a life sentence. That if we have an open attitude to it, and once we achieve acceptance and sort of accept for the moment certain doors are closed but new ones open, then there's a way forward. And there's a way forward that involves acceptance, compassion, patience, gratitude, new beginnings.